Right then, let's get straight to the point. GCSE AQA English Language Reading Exam. It can feel like, well, a bit of a beast, can it?
Mm-hmm. It really can.
But we've got the insider tips to help you absolutely nail it. Think of this as mission control for your reading paper, clear strategies, no fluff.
Exactly. We've looked at what makes examiners tick, and we've sort of boiled it down to the crucial skills you need.
Yeah.
These aren't just things to remember. They're ways to unlock better marks, really, by showing a deeper understanding of the texts you're reading.
Okay, first up then, tip 1. It's all about using quotes in evidence. Now, we all know we need to do it, but why is it so important for getting those top grades?
Well, examiners aren't just checking if you can find a quote. They're looking to see if you can pick the most telling bits, the bits that back up your interpretation.
Ah.
They call it judicious selection,
Uh-huh.
choosing those really insightful little snippets that prove you've understood the core of what's going on.
Right, so ditch the massive essay-long quotes. Keep them short, punchy, and directly on the money. And here's a trick to make your analysis really sing. Try embedding your quotes. What difference does that actually make? Like, how does the examiner see that?
Okay, think of it like this. Instead of just sort of presenting a piece of evidence, like plonking it down,
Yeah.
embedding shows you understand how that evidence fits into your argument. You weave the quote into your own sentence. It makes your analysis flow much more seamlessly.
Okay, gotcha.
So, for example, instead of saying, Sach's mother, who's got good eyesight, laser eye, you could try. Sasha's mother is described as using her laser eye to target Sasha when she enters the room. See how that immediately feels more analytical?
Absolutely. It's not just the quote, it's what you do with it. Okay, here's another one. Instead of, I told myself I must be mistaken, this quote shows the narrator's anxiety. Maybe something like,
You could say the writer uses internal monologue and the repetition of I told myself to reveal the character's anxiety and fear that she wasn't mistaken.
yeah.
It just gets under the skin of the writing more, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Precisely. And to keep this really focused, try remembering this little structure. Point about what? Quote why.
Right.
So make your point clearly, briefly say what the quote is about in the text, then drop in that short, powerful quote and immediately explain why you've chosen it and how it nails your point.
And it's all about that connection, isn't it? That link.
Totally.
The examiner wants to see a clear link between the specific words you've picked and your brilliant thinking. Don't just chuck in a whole sentence hoping something sticks.
Exactly. Be forensic.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, which word or maybe phrase in this quote is the absolute key to proving my point? And always make it blindingly obvious who or what the quote is referring to. Every single idea you put forward needs that solid piece of evidence, a word, a phrase, a tiny detail from the text.
Right, solid advice. On to tip 2 then, making the most of quotations. So we're using them right, embedding them. But how do we really extract every last drop of insight? To properly impress the examiner.
This is where you can really elevate your answer. Instead of just making one point and moving swiftly on, really dig deep into a single quotation.
Okay.
Zoom right in on those individual words. Ask yourself, what are the connotations? What are those extra layers of meaning and feeling they carry?
Give us an example to really get this.
Okay, say you write, the word vast shows the power of the sea. That's okay. It's not wrong.
But it's a bit basic.
Exactly. To really show your understanding, try something more like. The writer describes the wave as vast to demonstrate its immense size, immediately suggesting just how powerful and overwhelming the sea must feel. See how much more you've unpacked from just one word.
Yeah, definitely. You're not just stating the obvious, you're exploring the actual impact of that word on the reader.
Precisely. And once you've explored those individual words, try and broaden your focus a bit. How does that word or phrase connect to the bigger picture?
Like themes.
Yeah, does it link to any of the main themes you spotted in the text? And just a quick heads up on subject terminology, things like metaphors, similes, personification.
Right.
Don't just name them, like point spotting.
Yeah.
Explain why the writer has used that specific technique in that exact moment and what effect it's intended to have on you, the reader.
So it's not enough to just shout metaphor.
No, not at all.
You need to explain what's being compared and why that comparison is so effective. Why does it work?
Absolutely. Let's look at that bit from Half of a Yellow Sun we mentioned before. The compound smelling sweet, heady, bushes like slender hills, the lawn glistened and butterflies hovered overhead. What can we really unpick from those few details?
Well, sweet Hetty, that almost sounds intoxicating, doesn't it? Like the air itself is having an effect.
Mm-hmm.
And comparing ordinary bushes to slender hills makes the landscape seem almost, I don't know, magical, bigger than life.
Exactly. And the fact that the lawn glistened suggests a kind of perfect, almost artificial beauty, maybe?
Yeah, like it's pristine.
And the butterflies hovered overhead adds to this sense of a really tranquil, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Put it all together, and these details show us how completely different and almost enchanted this new place feels to Ugu, especially compared to his previous home.
Right. Okay, moving on. Tip 3 is all about comparing texts. Now, this is a big one in the nonfiction paper, isn't it? It's not enough to just talk about each text separately. You have to link them.
Spot on. Examiners really want to see how you can draw connections and spot differences in how writers present their ideas, their viewpoints, their perspectives.
Okay.
And you'll often be looking at texts from different time periods, maybe an older one and a modern one. So you need to be aware of how that might affect their style and format too.
So what's the most effective way to tackle a comparison question? Like step by step.
Okay, first, read that question like a hawk. Highlight the specific things you need to compare. Don't get sidetracked into just summarizing each text. That's a common trap.
Right, focus is key.
Then go through both texts methodically. Actively look for at least, say, 5 key areas where they connect or contrast. Jot down brief quotes or references as you go. Don't rely on memory.
So you're actively hunting for those points of overlap and difference while you read.
Precisely. And as you're doing that, make a quick note, maybe mentally, maybe physically, of the writer's feelings and attitudes. Are they passionate and personal? Maybe quite emotive.
Or are they more detached?
Yeah, more detached, like a factual report. Are they using any persuasive techniques like rhetorical questions to sway you?
Okay, so you've got your points, your quotes, your notes on feelings. What next? How do you structure the answer?
Start your answer with a really clear thesis statement. Just one sentence that sums up your main interpretation of how the two texts relate to each other, specifically answering the question.
Okay, a main argument up front.
Then aim for maybe 4 or 5 well-developed comparison paragraphs, and this is crucial. You need to be discussing both texts within the same paragraph.
Integrating them.
Yes. Analyzing their methods side by side and backing up your points with evidence from both texts in that paragraph.
And the magic words we need to sprinkle in, the comparison language.
Comparative language is absolutely key. Words like similarly, in comparison, whereas however, on the other hand, they act as signposts, clearly showing the examiner you're actively comparing.
Right.
For example, you could say something like, both writers use vivid imagery to describe the landscape. However, the modern text employs more metaphorical language, whereas the older text relies on more literal descriptions.
We've got that example here looking at how 2 fictional texts present feelings about train journeys. How does that illustrate the comparison?
Yeah, so text A suggests the journey is something to be endured, doesn't it? With the repetition of no more, and that sense of relief at being almost over, even if there's nothing particularly exciting waiting at the end.
Right, quite negative.
Whereas text B, in contrast, just bursts with enthusiasm. It uses words like love and raptures, even personifying the train as a wonderful beast she feels like she wants to pet.
Yeah.
The stark difference in their language immediately highlights their contrasting viewpoints on train travel.
Brilliant. That makes it really clear. Any final golden rules for comparison questions? Top tips.
Definitely. Always think about when the texts were written, this can massively influence their style, their language, the issues they focus on.
Okay.
Really think about what the similarities and differences actually reveal. What do they tell you about the writer's attitudes, their purpose in writing, the broader themes?
Don't just list them.
No. Never make a comparison without backing it up with specific evidence from both texts. And always analyze how the writers create their effect, the methods. And keep that comparative language flowing throughout your answer. Don't just use it once.
Great stuff. Okay, tip 4 is all about implicit versus explicit meaning. Now, this can sound a bit tricky, but getting your head around it is a real game changer for analysis, right?
Absolutely vital. Honestly, it's key to unlocking the deeper layers of any text. So explicit meaning is what the writer states directly.
The obvious stuff.
Yeah, the clear facts, examples, arguments, opinions that are right there on the surface. It's what you can point to and say, look, here it is in black and white.
So no detective work needed for that bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But implicit meaning.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's hinted at, the underlying messages, the things you need to infer by reading between the lines.
The hidden clues.
Pretty much. The writer doesn't state it outright, but they give you clues through their word choices, the tone they use, how characters act or react.
Give us a quick example to make this really stick.
Okay, take this quote from a past paper. "It was the hyena that worried me. I had not forgotten father's words. Hyenas attack in packs whatever animal can be run down."
Okay.
Now, the explicit information is pretty clear. The narrator's worried about the hyena, they remember their father's warning, and hyenas hunt vulnerable animals in packs. Facts.
Right. Stated clearly. So what's the implicit message lurking beneath the surface there?
Well, implicitly, it suggests the narrator feels vulnerable themselves. Maybe they even see themselves as potential prey in that situation.
Ah.
That phrase, whatever animal can be run down, hints at a relentless, indiscriminate danger. It creates a sense of fear and unease that goes way beyond just a factual statement about hyena behavior. You have to think about the implications of those words for the character.
Got it. So how do we sharpen our skills at spotting these hidden meanings? What should you look out for?
Read very closely, obviously, and ask yourself, what is the writer not saying directly here, but maybe suggesting? Pay really close attention to the connotations of individual words. Do they evoke certain feelings or associations?
I was the word vast earlier.
Exactly. What's the overall tone of the passage? Is it tense, sad, hopeful? And really analyze what the characters do and how they react. Their unspoken feelings, their body language that's described, can be incredibly revealing.
Right.
And always try to connect what you think is implicit with what's explicitly stated in the text. It needs to be grounded.
And are there any key words that can act as little flags when we're writing about this to show the examiner we know the difference?
Yes, definitely. When you're discussing explicit meaning, words like expressed, revealed, stated, shown, denotes, apparent, evident are really useful.
Okay.
And for implicit meaning, keep an eye out for opportunities to use words like implies, suggests, hints at, alludes to, indicates, connotes, or evokes. They signal you're interpreting.
Brilliant. Right. Tip 5 is how to summarize. Now, this isn't just about copying out chunks of the text, is it? It's about showing you've really understood the core ideas.
Absolutely. A good summary is all about identifying the most important points in a text, or maybe between two texts, and then condensing them clearly and concisely.
Yeah.
And crucially, usually in your own words.
Right.
You need to select the relevant info, focusing on both the explicit information and, again, those underlying implicit meanings if the question asks for differences in viewpoint, for example.
So it's like extracting the essential DNA of the text and putting it into a shorter form. What's your step-by-step guide to writing a killer summary?
Okay, 4 key steps. First, really nail down the main focus of the question. What exactly are you being asked to summarize? Differences, similarities. Find those crucial keywords.
Step 1, understand the question.
Exactly. Second, scan the text or texts and pinpoint the details that are relevant to that focus. Make quick annotations, maybe underline or highlight for both explicit and implicit information related to the question.
Okay.
Third, interpret and infer meaning. Read between those lines, make connections between different parts of the text that are relevant. And finally, step 4, synthesize your ideas. Bring those key points together logically and write your summary using clear, concise language. Keep it brief.
We've got a couple of example summaries here comparing Glastonbury Festival and Greenwich Fair from some made-up sources. How do they show good summary technique?
Yeah, so the first model gives a single paragraph that efficiently compares the two events. It highlights the different types of crowds they attract, the different activities offered like modern music versus traditional entertainment, and it implies differences in how long people might stay.
Concise comparison.
The second model uses separate paragraphs for each event first, providing slightly more detail perhaps about their specific characteristics before maybe linking them. Both approaches can work as long as they effectively summarize the key similarities or differences asked for in the question.
And what are some useful phrases to weave into our summaries, some sentence starters?
Yeah. Handy phrases are good. To introduce a point directly from the text, try things like, the text states that, the writer describes, or according to the source.
Okay.
When you're inferring meaning, which you often need to do when summarizing differences in viewpoints, good phrases include, this suggests that, this implies that, or perhaps it could be inferred that.
Yeah.
Great, really useful. Okay, and finally, tip 6, how to evaluate. Now, when you're asked to evaluate, what are the examiners really looking for? It's more than just saying if you like the text, right?
No, definitely. Much more. Evaluation is about making an informed judgment, forming an opinion, but one that's based on your detailed analysis of the text.
You need to look closely at the choices the writer has made, the language they used, the way they structured it, the techniques, and assess how effective those choices are. Do they work? How well do they convey the message or create an impact on the reader?
So when they ask that classic question, to what extent do you agree with some statement about the text?
Yeah,
They want to see us backing up our viewpoint with solid evidence and explaining why we think that way about the writer's methods and their effects.
absolutely. And to structure your evaluation effectively, you can think in 3 stages: what, how a go you, and WHY.
Okay, what, how, WHY. Break that down.
So first, what? Make a clear judgment about the statement in the question. State your opinion clearly. Do you agree, disagree, partly agree? And be specific about your opinion on the writer's effectiveness regarding that statement.
Okay, take a stance.
Second, hate OW. How does the writer achieve this effect or support challenge the statement? Provide evidence from the text, relevant quotes again, and identify the writer's methods. Point out literary devices, structural features, tone, word choice, and explain how they create a particular effect that relates to the statement.
Evidence and methods.
And third, WHY. Explain why your evidence supports your opinion. Why did the writer make those specific choices? How do they contribute to the overall meaning or effect, focusing back on the statement in the question? Why is it effective or perhaps less effective?
We've got that example again, looking at Ugu feeling homesick in Half of a Yellow Sun.
Yeah.
How does the what, how, WHY structure work there?
Yes, so what the evaluation might start by agreeing that the writer effectively conveys Ugu's homesickness. How it then shows how the writer uses the contrast between Ugu's new cement wall and his memory of the mud walls back home to highlight his sense of displacement. It also picks out the direct statement, for a brief moment, he wished he were back there now.
Clear evidence.
Why? Finally, it explains why this is effective. It explains that the contrast emphasizes the unfamiliarity and perhaps the coldness of the new place. And the direct thought clearly reveals his longing, allowing the reader to really empathize with Ugu's emotional state.
Makes sense. And just like with summarizing, are there any handy phrases we can use to structure our evaluation and make it sound, evaluative?
Definitely. Using evaluative language is key. Phrases like the use of successfully creates, the writer skillfully uses. This is effective because the contrast between and powerfully creates and the writer deliberately chooses can all help you articulate your evaluation clearly and persuasively. Or perhaps less successfully if you disagree.
Brilliant. So there you have it. 6 killer tips, hopefully killer in a good way, to arm yourselves with for the GCSE English Language Reading exam.
Yeah, keep these key strategies locked in your memory as you head into that exam hall. Think of them as like your secret weapons for unlocking a deeper understanding.
They're really showing those examiners what you're capable of. And on that note, a final thought for you listening. How will you use these tips to not just answer the questions, but to truly understand what the writers are doing and why? What's maybe one technique, just one, that you're going to really focus on mastering first to elevate your reading analysis? Have a think about it.
Good luck with the exams.
Yeah, best of luck. And we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.